My boss called me trash and fired me in front of 998 employees. That day, I decided if I was going down, he was going down with me. Please stay with me as I tell you my story, and please do not forget to support our channel by subscribing, liking, and sharing with your loved ones. My name is Harper Collins. I'm 32 years old, and for the past 8 years I gave everything I had to the company where I worked. I was a project manager who lived on black coffee, late nights, and endless sacrifices. I missed birthdays, anniversaries, even my own engagement party once, just to make sure deadlines were met and Nathaniel Briggs, our CEO, looked good in front of shareholders. I never complained. I thought if I kept proving myself, one day it would pay off. Nathaniel wasn't the kind of boss anyone admired. He was the kind of man people feared. Tall, smug, always dressed in the sharpest suits, he had this way of talking down to people as if their worth was measured by how much profit they made for him. He loved power, and he loved breaking people just to show he could. Still, I believed if I worked hard enough, maybe he'd respect me. That illusion shattered on a Thursday morning I'll never forget. It was an all-hands meeting, nearly 1,000 employees packed into the auditorium and countless others watching online. Nathaniel took the stage like a king addressing his court, and I sat in the front row, my presentation notes clutched tightly in my hands. The project we had been working on was massive, the kind of deal that could make or break the company. I knew every detail, every figure, every risk. I was ready, but when my name was mentioned, it wasn't to acknowledge my effort. Nathaniel leaned into the microphone and smirked. "You know why this project is delayed?" he said, scanning the audience. "Because my so-called project manager can't do her job. Harper Collins has been nothing but dead weight." The room went still. My chest tightened, heat rising to my face. I opened my mouth to speak, to defend myself, but his voice cut through louder. "She's trash. And today we're cleaning house." Gasps echoed through the crowd. My ears rang, my vision blurred, but I stood frozen as Nathaniel waved to security like I was some criminal being escorted out. My colleagues shifted uncomfortably, some avoiding eye contact, others whispering. Not one person stood up for me. 8 years of loyalty, and this was how it ended. As I walked out under hundreds of eyes, humiliation burned deeper than any wound. But underneath that pain, something else sparked to life. I wasn't just angry. I wasn't just broken. I was done being their scapegoat. Nathaniel thought he had silenced me, but he had no idea. If he believed I was trash, then fine, I would show him exactly what trash could do. That was the moment I swore he would regret underestimating me. Before everything fell apart, my life revolved around work. I didn't just put in long hours. I lived inside that office. While most people left on Friday nights to be with family, I stayed back, going through reports until the cleaning crew begged me to leave. I skipped dinners, ignored texts from friends, and even let my engagement celebration end without me because a last-minute meeting came up. At the time, I convinced myself it was temporary, that one day it would all be worth it. Colton Reyes, my fiancé, tried to understand. He was patient in the beginning, telling me he admired my drive. He brought me food when I worked late, called to remind me to sleep, and waited up just to hear my voice before bed. But slowly, I started to notice the distance. Our conversations became short, his laughter less frequent. He wanted a future where we planned a wedding, built a home, maybe started a family. I, on the other hand, kept promising after this project, and once this deal is done. The truth was, there was always another deadline waiting. I wasn't just another employee in that building. I carried the blueprint for the company's biggest move yet, a merger worth over $4 billion. While Nathaniel took the spotlight, I was the one pulling the strings behind the scenes. I drafted the schedules, cross-checked contracts, and analyzed numbers until my eyes ached. There wasn't a single clause or condition I hadn't studied. I knew the risks buried in the fine print, the hidden debts disguised as assets, the tiny loopholes no one else caught. If anyone truly understood the deal inside and out, it was me. I didn't mind staying in the shadows. For a long time, I believed recognition didn't matter as much as results. I kept telling myself that sacrifices were normal, that losing weekends and missing birthdays was the price of success. But looking back, I see how deeply I gave myself away. The company wasn't just my job, it became my identity. Every late night and every lost moment of joy became bricks in the tower I was building for someone else to stand on. What hurt the most wasn't simply the insult Nathaniel hurled at me later. It was the way he erased years of effort as if they meant nothing. I had poured my mind and heart into making sure that merger would succeed. Without me, the whole structure would have collapsed long before it reached the final stage. Yet none of that mattered when he needed someone to blame. At home, Colton's eyes told me what he couldn't always say out loud. He missed me, the version of me that laughed freely and didn't carry a laptop everywhere. I kept pushing him aside with promises of soon. Deep down, I knew soon was slipping further away. I thought if I just endured a little longer, everything would come together. Instead, the very thing I gave everything for became the knife that cut me down. I drove home that day in silence, the words still echoing in my head. My chest felt heavy, and every turn of the wheel seemed to pull me deeper into the shame that clung to me. By the time I reached the apartment, my hands were trembling so badly I could barely fit the key in the lock. Colton opened the door before I could even knock. He must have been waiting, worried after hearing what had happened. His face tightened the second he saw mine, and without a word, he pulled me into his arms. For a moment, I let myself collapse there, tears sliding down my face while his hand rubbed slow circles across my back. When I finally looked at him, his jaw was set hard. He was angry not at me, but at the way I had been treated. "They humiliated you in front of everyone," he said, his voice sharp. "After everything you've done for them, that's how they throw you out." He paced the room like he needed somewhere to put his rage, fists clenching at his sides. I sank onto the couch, feeling smaller than I ever had before. Part of me wanted to scream, another part just wanted to disappear. The thought of walking into another office, another boardroom, seemed impossible. My career had been my life, and now it felt like it had been ripped away in an instant. I whispered to him that maybe this was it, maybe I was done. Maybe I wasn't strong enough to start over again. Colton sat beside me, grabbing my hand firmly. "You're not done," he said, softer now. "Don't let him decide your worth." His words were kind, but they barely reached me. The humiliation had already burrowed deep inside, convincing me I had lost everything. Later that night, unable to sleep, I turned on my laptop out of habit. My fingers moved almost without thought, logging into the company portal. To my surprise, the system didn't block me. My account was still active. Files opened as if nothing had changed. Pages of contracts, emails, and private notes stared back at me, all connected to the massive deal I had helped build. Nathaniel hadn't even bothered to cut me off. At first, I just stared at the screen, unsure what I was even doing. But as I scrolled, memories of countless nights working on these same documents returned. I saw the sections only I had written, the red flags I had flagged but buried under orders. Every word reminded me of how much I had given, and how easily I had been discarded. A new feeling began to replace the despair. It started small, like a spark in the dark, but quickly grew stronger. If Nathaniel thought I was powerless, he was wrong. He might have stripped me of my title, but he had left me with the one thing that mattered most: knowledge. I shut the laptop slowly, a strange calm washing over me. For the first time since that morning, I didn't feel broken. I felt dangerous. The man who had laughed at me in front of nearly 1,000 people had no idea what kind of storm he had just unleashed. I worked through the night, methodical and quiet. I copied folders, exported spreadsheets, and saved every message that mattered. I named the files clearly so nothing would be lost. It felt strange to act so calmly, but I knew chaos wouldn't help. Every document I pulled was another piece of the puzzle. At first, the numbers looked like the usual corporate gloss: optimistic projections and careful footnotes. But then I found things that didn't add up. Valuations had been inflated in places that made no sense. Lines in balance sheets were shifted and footnotes buried debts in vague language. Somebody had smoothed over risks with clever wording so outsiders would never notice. As I followed the trail, I found bank transfers with odd descriptions and emails that hinted at payments being routed through third parties. My stomach flipped. This was not sloppy accounting. It was deliberate deception. The deeper I went, the uglier it became. There were contracts with vendors that charged far above market rates. A consultant's invoice matched a wire to an account I had never seen before. Some memos suggested favors being exchanged for company concessions. Pieces that looked unrelated at first suddenly fit together like shards of a broken mirror. The picture that formed was ugly. Executives lining up ways to siphon value before the merger closed. I started building a timeline. Who signed what when payments were approved, which board members pushed for certain clauses. I traced meetings in encrypted chat logs and matched them to dates when a company asset was quietly revalued. There were mentions, carefully coded, about cost-cutting after the merger. Phrases like streamline operations and optimize headcount were thinly veiled plans to cut thousands of positions. They talked about raising the share price, cashing out, and leaving the smaller teams to shoulder the fallout. Knowing all this made the choice clear. I could expose these actions and possibly stop the layoffs. That thought shifted everything inside me. My initial urge for personal payback changed into something bigger. This was not only about one man's cruelty. It was about protecting people who would lose their livelihoods because of greed. I began to organize the evidence. I made copies, redacted anything that could endanger whistleblowers, and labeled each item with dates and sources. I created a short, focused summary, so someone reading it wouldn't have to wade through hundreds of pages to see the core wrongdoing. Clarity mattered. Confusion would help them deny it. The risk was real. If I moved too fast, the people responsible could wipe traces or discredit me. If I moved too slow, the merger would complete and the damage would be done. I set priorities. Confirm the most damning transactions, secure corroborating emails, and prepare a path to share the findings safely. I told myself to be precise, not vengeful. The aim was to stop the plan and hold those accountable, not to create a spectacle. If I could prove illegal conduct and show a clear link between decisions and intended layoffs, regulators and rivals would have to act. Night after night I worked, not for applause, but because the truth needed to be kept intact. Each verified fact strengthened my resolve. What started as a reaction to being wronged became a mission to prevent harm to hundreds of people who had trusted the company. I wasn't just collecting dirt. I was building a case that could stop a catastrophe. I debated with Colton whether to go public, but the thought of Nathaniel's legal power terrified me. He had lawyers who could twist anything into a weapon. If I went to the press or regulators, he'd drag my name through the mud, accuse me of stealing, and bury me in lawsuits until I couldn't breathe. Colton kept saying the truth would stand on its own, but I shook my head. "You don't know him like I do," I told him. "He'll crush me before anyone listens." That night, lying awake, I realized there was another path. Instead of going wide, I could go directly to the people who mattered most, the rival company in the merger. If they pulled out, Nathaniel's empire would crack instantly. It wouldn't matter what story he spun afterward. Without their signature, the whole deal would die. The name that came to mind was Vivian Cross, the rival CEO. She was known for being razor-sharp, the kind of woman who could see through polished lies and make hard calls without flinching. She hated deception, and if anyone could spot the fraud in my documents, it would be her. I started preparing. I printed only the most important papers. Numbers that didn't match, transactions that reeked of payoffs, notes that hinted at layoffs hidden under efficiency plans. I slipped them into a neat folder and made a backup copy on an encrypted drive. I scrubbed my devices of anything that could trace back to me. Every step felt like walking a tightrope. Colton watched me, worry etched across his face. "If Nathaniel finds out you met her, he'll come after you. He'll say you stole company files. He could ruin your life." His words echoed the fear already living inside me, but I steadied myself. If I stay quiet, thousands of people will lose their jobs. I can't let him get away with it. Not this time. I bought a prepaid phone and sent a short, anonymous message to Vivian's office. No details, just a warning. Urgent information about the merger must be reviewed before signing. I asked for a private meeting, not knowing if she would even respond. When her office finally confirmed, I felt my pulse race. There was no turning back. The meeting place was a small diner on the edge of the city, somewhere ordinary, almost forgettable. I arrived early, sitting in a corner booth with the folder clutched tightly in my hands. My heart pounded every time the door opened, but I kept my head down, rehearsing what I would say. Then she walked in, calm, confident, her eyes scanning the room like she already owned it. She slid into the booth across from me, her presence commanding without a word. I pushed the folder across the table, my voice steady even though my hands shook. "These papers will explain better than I can," I told her. "If you read them closely, you'll see why this merger can't happen." I thought Colton was the one person I could lean on after everything. He held me when I cried, told me I was stronger than what Nathaniel had done, and promised we'd figure out a way through together. For a while, I believed him. I let myself feel safe in the idea that at least at home, I wasn't alone. But then small things began to bother me. He was gone more often, claiming late shifts or errands that didn't quite line up. His phone would light up with calls he ignored when I was in the room. I brushed it off, telling myself stress was making me paranoid. One evening, after he said he needed to meet a friend, I decided to follow him. I hated myself for doing it, but something in my gut told me the truth was waiting out there. I stayed far back, keeping my car a few lengths behind his. When he pulled up to a sleek hotel downtown, my stomach knotted. I watched him walk inside and head straight to the lounge. Minutes later, Nathaniel appeared. They shook hands like old allies and sat together, drinks in hand, leaning close as they talked. The sight hit me harder than being fired. My own fiancé was sitting with the man who had humiliated me in front of nearly 1,000 people. I sat frozen, gripping the steering wheel so tightly my hands ached. I couldn't hear their words, but the way Colton nodded, the way Nathaniel smirked, told me enough. Later, when I confronted him, he didn't even try to deny it. He admitted Nathaniel had offered him a position, something cushy, high-paying, secure. All he had to do was keep me from stirring trouble, convince me to let things go. His voice cracked as he told me he thought it was a chance for us to finally have stability. He said he wanted to protect us, but every word felt like glass in my chest. I couldn't believe it. The man I planned to marry, the one who swore he was on my side, had been working against me. He had sold out not just me, but every principle he claimed we shared, for a corner office and a fat paycheck. Betrayal doesn't always come from enemies. Sometimes it comes from the person you love most, and that cut deeper than Nathaniel's insults ever could. For a moment, I felt myself slipping. I wanted to crawl into bed and let it all consume me. But then a different fire rose inside. If Nathaniel thought he could turn the one person closest to me, if Colton thought I would fold just because he switched sides, they were both wrong. I refused to give them that satisfaction. I ended things that night cold and final. Colton begged, tried to explain, but I shut the door on him and everything we had built. My heartbreak was real, but my resolve was stronger. The fight was no longer about a job or even about revenge. It had become personal. Nathaniel had taken my career, and Colton had taken my trust. I would not let them take my will. This time, I was going to finish what I started. I sat in my car outside a quiet diner, the kind of place no one paid much attention to after dark. The neon sign flickered, and the parking lot was nearly empty. My hands shook on the steering wheel as I waited. I had gone over this decision 100 times in my head. Meeting Vivian Cross wasn't just risky, it was dangerous. If anyone found out, Nathaniel could crush me in court before I even had a chance to explain myself. But this was the only path left. At exactly midnight, a sleek black car pulled in. Vivian stepped out, looking every bit as composed as I had imagined. Her tailored coat, sharp gaze, and confident walk told me she was not someone easily fooled. I forced myself to breathe as she approached. We slipped into a booth near the back of the diner where the flickering lights barely reached. She didn't bother with small talk. You asked for this meeting. What could possibly be worth dragging me here in the middle of the night? Her voice was calm, but her eyes cut straight through me. I pulled a flash drive from my pocket and placed it on the table between us. My throat felt dry as I pushed it toward her. That, I said, is proof that Nathaniel's entire merger is built on lies. False numbers, hidden debt, payoffs you don't know about. Vivian raised an eyebrow but didn't touch the drive. And why would you, of all people, risk handing me this? From what I hear, you're not exactly on speaking terms with him anymore. For a moment, I hesitated. She had every right to doubt me. But the anger I'd been carrying for weeks surged up, giving me the words. I leaned forward, locking eyes with her. Because he called me trash in front of everyone. And I want to show him exactly what trash can do. Vivian tilted her head, studying me like she was weighing the truth behind my words. A slow, almost amused smile tugged at her lips. She finally picked up the drive, turning it between her fingers. That's a bold reason. But bold doesn't always mean smart. If you're lying, if this is some trick, you'll regret it. I'm not lying, I said firmly. Check it yourself. Every file, every number, it's all there. I'm not asking for protection. I just want the truth to come out, no matter what happens to me. For the first time, something shifted in her expression. The skepticism didn't disappear, but there was a flicker of respect. She slipped the drive into her bag and leaned back in the booth. I'll review it. If what you're saying holds up, this changes everything. The waitress came by to refill our coffees, unaware of the storm brewing in that small corner. Vivian and I sat in silence for a moment, the weight of what I'd just done pressing down on me. I had crossed a line I could never step back from. When she finally stood, she gave me one last glance. You might get your chance to prove him wrong. But be ready, this is going to get ugly. As she walked out, I sat frozen, equal parts terrified and alive. For the first time, I felt Nathaniel's power slipping, even if just a little. And I knew I had started something that couldn't be undone. The morning of the merger felt heavy with tension. Every news outlet had cameras set up outside the glass tower downtown, waiting to capture what was supposed to be Nathaniel's biggest triumph. I sat alone in my living room, the television volume turned up, my hands clutching the remote like it was the only thing keeping me steady. This was the day everything would come to light. Inside the conference hall, reporters filled the back rows, their eyes sharp and ready for headlines. The board members looked smug, already dreaming of bonuses. Nathaniel stood at the center of it all, grinning for the cameras, confident that nothing could touch him. I could almost hear his arrogance through the screen. Then Vivian walked in. Calm, collected, not a single flicker of doubt on her face. She took her place at the table, folder in hand. The cameras zoomed in, and the chatter in the room went quiet. Instead of signing, she placed the folder flat on the table and spoke clearly, her voice cutting through the silence. Cross Industries will not be moving forward with this deal, she announced. We have uncovered fraudulent valuations, concealed debts, and unlawful payments tied directly to this merger. We cannot, in good faith, proceed. The room erupted. Reporters shouted questions, flashes went off like fireworks, and panic spread across the boardroom. Nathaniel's smile faltered, his face tightening as the weight of her words settled in. He tried to argue, to deny, but she held her ground and repeated her statement, this time with the word evidence emphasized. The news anchors cut in, their voices full of shock. The stock ticker at the bottom of the screen went red instantly, numbers tumbling faster than I could follow. Billions evaporated in minutes. Investors scrambled to sell, board members exchanged panicked whispers, and Nathaniel's empire began to crumble in real time. I pressed a hand to my mouth, hardly believing what I was seeing. For so long I had imagined this moment, but reality was even more powerful. The man who had stripped me of my dignity in front of nearly 1,000 people was now losing everything in front of the entire world. The cameras caught the board members pulling away from him, their faces cold. Some were already leaving the room. Within hours, lawsuits were announced, shareholders demanded answers, and Nathaniel's reputation was dragged through the mud. His voice, once so commanding, was drowned out by the chaos around him. At home, I felt hot tears spill down my cheeks. Not the tears of shame I had cried weeks before, but tears of release, of long-awaited justice. The world was finally seeing the monster I had seen all along. The phone buzzed nonstop with messages from former co-workers who had also watched the downfall live. They couldn't believe what was happening, but I knew this was only the beginning. Nathaniel's empire wasn't just dented, it was shattered. And I was finally free of the weight he had put on my shoulders. For the first time in years, I breathed deeply, the air lighter than ever. Nathaniel's face was everywhere. News channels replayed clips of him dodging questions, his voice shaking as he tried to spin the disaster. He blamed rival companies, he blamed the economy, even hinted at sabotage. But none of it mattered. The documents Vivian had revealed were solid, and investigators wasted no time digging deeper. Every hour brought new headlines: financial crimes, secret accounts, shady deals. The empire he had built on arrogance and lies was collapsing faster than anyone thought possible. The board members who once praised him now pretended they hardly knew him. They issued public statements distancing themselves, calling his actions reckless. Investors pulled their money, leaving him cornered. The SEC announced a full investigation, and rumors of federal charges filled the air. Every person who had once stood at his side quietly slipped away. Nathaniel was no longer a respected leader. He had become the cautionary tale splashed across every screen. I knew it was only a matter of time before he came for me. And he did. One evening, I heard a knock on my door. When I opened it, Nathaniel stood there, no cameras, no audience, just a broken man clinging to anger. His suit was wrinkled, his expression wild, like someone who hadn't slept in days. "You did this," he hissed, stepping into the doorway. His voice was low but filled with rage. "You think you've won? You think you can destroy me?" I stood firm. For weeks I had imagined this confrontation, wondered what I would say if he ever looked me in the eye again. Strangely, I felt calm. I didn't need to shout or throw his cruelty back at him. He was already drowning, and I didn't need to push him further. "You fired the wrong person," I told him simply. My voice was steady, almost quiet, but the words hung in the air like a final verdict. He froze, his mouth opening like he wanted to argue, but nothing came out. The weight of those words pressed against him, because he knew they were true. He had underestimated me, treated me like I was disposable, and now the cost of that mistake was everything he had ever built. For a long moment, he just stood there, breathing heavily, his eyes darting around like he was searching for a lifeline that wasn't there. Then, without another word, he turned and walked away. His steps were heavy, shoulders slumped, the confidence he once carried completely gone. I closed the door and leaned against it, my chest rising and falling. Not out of fear, but out of release. The chapter was finally closing. Nathaniel wasn't the giant he pretended to be. Stripped of his power, his money, and his loyal followers, he was nothing more than a man who had burned every bridge behind him. The world would remember his name, but not for success. He would be remembered as the man who destroyed himself. Walking away from that company felt like stepping out of a burning building. The smoke still clung to me, the memories still burned in my chest, but I knew I was finally free. For years I had given every piece of myself to a job that saw me as replaceable, to a man who thought humiliation was leadership. Now, I didn't owe them another second of my life. Colton tried to patch things up after the dust settled, but the damage was already carved too deep. Trust, once broken, doesn't stitch back together with apologies. I had loved him, believed in us, but the moment he sided with Nathaniel for his own gain, he showed me who he really was. Ending the engagement was painful, but staying would have been worse. I chose myself instead, and for the first time in years, that choice felt right. The months that followed weren't easy. Starting over never is. I woke up some mornings wondering who I was without the long hours, the deadlines, the titles. But slowly, I found a new rhythm. I began taking on consulting projects for small businesses that didn't want to play dirty games. People who actually cared about their workers, who wanted to build something lasting without cutting corners or hiding secrets. Helping them grow gave me a sense of purpose that the corporate world never could. It felt different sitting across from clients who looked at me with respect instead of suspicion, who valued my ideas instead of stealing them. I wasn't chasing power anymore. I was choosing peace. And with every deal I helped shape, with every business I guided, I built a career on my own terms. I also noticed something about myself. I wasn't afraid anymore. Men like Nathaniel had once made me feel small, as though their titles gave them the right to decide my worth. But when you've seen someone like him unravel, you stop believing in their invincibility. They're not untouchable. They're not gods. They're just people hiding behind money and influence, and when the truth cracks through, they crumble like anyone else. Looking back, I realized his words that day, calling me trash in front of everyone, were the spark. He thought he was breaking me, but instead, he lit something he couldn't control. I wasn't trash. I was dynamite, and he handed me the match himself. Now, when I walk into a room, I carry that knowledge with me. I don't shrink. I don't second-guess my place. The scars are still there, but they remind me of what I survived, not of what I lost. Life is quieter now, but it's mine. No bosses to tear me down, no fiancé waiting to betray me, no cage disguised as ambition. Just me, building something honest out of the ruins. And that, I've learned, is the sweetest kind of freedom. Do you think I made the right decision by walking away from Colton and leaving corporate life behind? Or should I have tried to hold on a little longer? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments. And if you want more stories like mine, don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell so you never miss the next one.